Okay, so welcome to Brew Talk Sacramento, everyone. I know we're technically in Davis, so thank you all for coming out. My name is Chris Fernari. I'm the editor of Brewbound. To my right is Tom McCormick, the executive director of the California Craft Brewers Association. And I always love hanging out with Tom so he can catch everybody up on what's happening legislatively at the state level here in California, some of the issues that are pending, some that have passed, some that are sort of still in limbo, and just kind of going over those things, talking about the challenges of making things work so that you guys can have a little bit easier time selling beer, hopefully, and doing the fun things that you guys like to do. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Owens, Illinois, Vicinity Brew, and Reyes Beverage Group. Without these guys, we wouldn't be able to fly out from Boston and do a whole tour of the West Coast. We were in Portland last night. We're going to be going to LA tomorrow and San Diego on Thursday, and we have massive amounts of gear that we have to carry, and it gets expensive, so thank you guys for helping support our cause. And actually, Molly is here from Reyes, Ken is here from Owens, Illinois, and Randy's here from Vicinity Brew, so a big round of applause for those guys for showing up. So as I mentioned, Tom and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the legislative issues for the next half hour or so here in California. So let's just sort of jump right into it. Let's talk about some of the issues that we both have here on our printout.
I was going to say new style, old style. You have the
well, I got both.
Tablet, and I have the cheat sheet. But
I have the most important ones on here that I want to talk about.
Okay.
And then if we run out of time, I have this.
Okay.
So the first one I wanted to talk about is AB 2004, which adds 2 new privileges for craft brewers. Tell me about that one.
Well, this one's my favorite bill in the legislature this year because it's sponsored by the California Craft Brewers Association. So we are the sponsor of it. And it is a bill that will add 2 new privileges for beer manufacturers in California. The first privilege is that it will allow beer manufacturers to attend a farmer's market and be able to sell their products at the farmer's market. So that's not currently allowed. A brewery can go to a farmer's market to talk about their products and have their signage, but they cannot sell any product at a farmer's market. So this will allow a beer manufacturer to sell bottles, growlers, kegs at a farmer's market. So we're really pleased about that. It's been moving through the legislature unopposed and moving through the committees on unanimous votes. So we're pretty certain that that's going to pass. The second component to the same bill is a new privilege that will allow beer manufacturers to serve or sell wine at a private party or private function at the brewery, which is not currently allowed. If you're a brew pub and you have a restaurant and serve food, you can serve wine. But if you're just a brewery, a beer manufacturer without a restaurant, currently you're not allowed to serve or sell wine, even at a private party. So breweries are hosting more and more weddings and parties and special events, and particularly at weddings, people want to have champagne, or not everybody loves beer, so it's nice to be able to offer that at these types of events.
So the last update on this bill was from last month, the 24th of June. Has anything changed since then? I think then it passed Senate committee. Where is it now? What's the most recent update?
Yeah, it's just moving forward. The legislature is on their summer recess right now, 4 weeks off. They come back August 4th, so everything is on pause right now.
Okay.
But that particular bill is in Appropriations Committee, and there's no significant financial impacts. It'll float through there probably without a vote, and then move over to the second house, move over to the Senate for the Senate GO Committee, and then a floor vote.
Okay. Now, was this something that craft brewers were talking to you guys about at the association and saying, look, farmers markets are a really big opportunity for us to get out and showcase our brands. We got to make this happen? Or was this something that you guys recognized?
No, that's a good question. We get feedback all the time from our members as to what changes they would like to see. In other words, why can't we do this or why can't we do that? So every year we have to look at all those wants and needs and kind of package them all together and move forward with what we think we can realistically. So this was based on input from our membership.
Cool. And so currently wineries can sell at farmers markets, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So I guess help walk us through the sort of the thought process of allowing one alcoholic beverage manufacturer to sell their products versus another. I mean, it seems a little bit unfair.
Well, we're catching up to the wine industry, and we're very proud of that because the wine industry has been doing what we're doing now for a much longer period of time. In other words, they've had an association that was politically involved now for 30 years. And so they had that law changed quite a while ago. I think it was roughly about 15 years ago. So roughly about 15 years ago, wineries can go to a farmer's market either, but the wine industry said, let's change the law, and they did, and they didn't include beer because they didn't have to, and they did it
why
for
would
their
they allow other people to compete with them?
they did it for their members, their constituents, so
Right.
they didn't fold beer into it, and that's pretty typical. So we are kind of catching up in going through the statute and looking at those privileges that are allowed to wine and not beer because they are very comparable products.
How big of an opportunity is the farmers market, and what are the sort of challenges there? Because it is going to be direct from the brewery to the consumer. So it seems like there's a couple of things there. One, there's an opportunity to allow the brewery to sell their products direct, which could open the door maybe for direct mailing or anything. We're seeing a little bit of that right now, some online retailers shutting down. So that, at least is a step in the right direction, allowing direct to consumer at the farmers markets. But it does cut out the wholesaler. So are those considerations being talked about? And what were those discussions like?
Those considerations are being talked about, and that is a concern of the wholesalers, and it's a legitimate concern of the wholesalers, but it's an opportunity for particularly for small startup breweries to interact with their consumer. And ultimately, that's going to help the wholesalers by allowing these small startups to grow and outgrow selling at farmers markets and outgrow just selling at tasting rooms and self-distribution. And ultimately, they're going to need distributors to service their products and get their products to retail. I mean, that happened with Sierra Nevada as a great example. They started as obviously a very, very small brewery. They started through self-distribution in Chico. They would not be here today if they weren't able to initially self-distribute their products in Chico, and now they provide a lot of revenue to a lot of distributors. So I see that model continuing. So I won't say it's a concern of the wholesalers. They're not opposed to the bill, but we've had that discussion with them. They're okay with it, and ultimately I think it will benefit the wholesalers. But it's a great opportunity for small breweries to interface and interact with the consumers and be able to sell them a growler or a six-pack right on the spot to be able to take home.
Was there any friction when those discussions were happening between the wholesalers and you guys and the brewers?
No.
Not much?
No.
So the wholesalers clearly do recognize the opportunity it allows the brewers not only to have, but in turn, hopefully, sell at the farmer's market, go pick up a bottle at the store sort of thing.
Correct. It's also difficult to oppose something that is basically just a privilege that the wineries already have.
Right.
And we're just seeking parity with the wineries. It kind of neutralizes any argument to it. It's something that wineries have been doing for 15 years or so with no issues, no problems. Why not allow craft breweries to do the same?
Sure. And what kinds of breweries do you expect to take advantage of this? I mean, will you see, I wouldn't imagine that a brewery like Sierra Nevada would be particularly interested in going to too many farmers markets, but do you envision it mostly being smaller breweries that are, that sort of 1 to 10 barrel range, or?
I do, mostly, but not exclusively. There are some restrictions to it. One of the restrictions is that you can only attend a farmer's market that's in the county of your brewery, your production plant, or adjacent counties. So if you're a brewery in Northern California, you can't go all around the state and attend farmers markets. And that's kind of the intent of farmers markets, is to promote local, regional products. But I think
There's some big counties in California, though.
there's some big counties and adjacent counties. So, I mean, if you're surrounded.
Could hit the whole Bay Area.
Yeah, it could be 4 or 5 counties total, easy. But it will be, I think, mostly used by smaller breweries and particularly by startups. But it'll be kind of fun to watch, and who knows, maybe Sierra Nevada will go to the farmer's market in Chico.
Final question before we move on to the next one. Likelihood of this passing, you think is pretty high, or?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Anything can happen at the state capitol. Anything can happen. You cannot predict anything at the state capitol, but I am very optimistic on this bill.
Awesome. All right, so next one on the docket was AB 1928, which prohibits retailers from redeeming any type of coupon that is funded or furnished by a beer manufacturer or wholesaler, and discontinues the practice of scambacks. Now, what's interesting here is on this sheet that you had given me, it said that I guess Anheuser-Busch was actually the sponsor of this particular bill, which was pretty interesting. Any updates? Has it been signed? It looks like it's awaiting a governor's signature.
It is on the governor's desk right now. So it has passed the legislature and awaiting the governor's signature.
And how does this impact craft brewers particularly?
Well, does anyone in the room use scanbacks? Does anyone do scanbacks? No. It's not something that's used a lot by smaller breweries, by the craft brewing industry, used predominantly by the larger craft breweries. So it won't have a big impact on the craft brewing industry, but we are supporting the bill. It's, again, a bill sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, and it is something that the larger craft breweries use, but smaller ones tend not to.
And do you think this will allow some of the smaller brands to compete a little bit more fairly, since nobody here that on the small level is using these scambacks? So
I don't think it'll have a big impact, but if it's going to skew it one way or the other, yes, it's going to help the smaller brewers over the bigger brewers.
Sure. So we will wait and see what happens with that.
Yeah, the retailers are lobbying the governor's office pretty strongly right now for him not to sign it, but that'll be interesting one to watch.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's move on to something that's a little bit more applicable to craft, and it's I think the funnest one to talk about. We talked a lot about it the other night, but AB 2010, which is duplicate licenses. Walk me through some of the ins and outs of that. I know it has some interesting backstory as well.
Yeah, and I don't think it'll impact the craft brewers that much because not that many craft breweries use a duplicate license. But a duplicate license is kind of an oddity in the state statute right now. It allows currently a craft brewery to get a duplicate license from their master beer manufacturer's license, and that duplicate license can be located anywhere. So it doesn't have to be at the brewery or adjacent to the brewery. It can be located anywhere in the state. And it's odd in that it allows all the privileges of the beer manufacturer's license except for manufacturing. And it was originally put in the statute for breweries to be able to get a quick and easy license for a satellite warehouse. But as more and more privileges were given to beer manufacturers, the duplicate license kind of adopted those same privileges. So currently, a beer manufacturer is allowed to get unlimited number of duplicate licenses in the state. They're issued forthwith, so they don't go through the usual process with the ABC. And a number of stakeholders, including ourselves, felt that that could be abused. And part of our role and our mission is to kind of protect our industry and make sure that the craft brewing industry remains authentic and true to what it is. And we felt that there were many scenarios that somebody could take advantage of that and theoretically apply for and open up 100 nightclubs throughout the state, and the ABC would have to issue those licenses forthwith without going through kind of due process.
It definitely seems like a loophole.
It is a loophole, yeah. So we worked with other stakeholders in the industry in the last year or so to come to an agreement as to how to better manage the duplicate license. And to some of our members, it was perceived as kind of giving up a privilege, and in essence it was, but at the same time, I really feel that it's in the best interest of the industry. So we worked with the other beer manufacturers, large breweries, and particularly with the beer wholesalers to come to an agreement to put a numerical cap on the number of duplicate licenses with a retail privilege that is allowed, and to remove the forthwith. So that bill is moving through the legislature right now. It puts a numerical cap of up to 6 duplicate licenses with the retail privilege.
And it'll have to go through a longer process of being approved, you're saying?
Correct, yeah.
Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I think of a place like San Diego where, in the last couple of years, we saw Stone open up a lot of secondary locations. I don't think all of them, had breweries on site. Some of them were just strictly tap rooms.
Some of them are 23s, and so a Type 23 or an 01, both are beer manufacturers. You're allowed an unlimited number of those. So you can open up an unlimited number of breweries in the state. So, but these are retail locations without beer manufacturing.
Which is sort of the best part of the whole thing, right?
Which is kind of the best part of the whole thing.
You don't
But
have to do any work there.
it is basically a complete erosion of the three-tier system. They are tight houses. And, but there have been some breweries that have used them. They're appropriate for opening up tasting rooms and for breweries to promote their products through the tasting rooms. So they do serve a legitimate process.
So how did you guys arrive at the 6 figure? And what was that process like, having to convince your constituents that this is something that should be changed? And I mean, it definitely seems like you worked at least somewhat well with the wholesalers, which I could see them being...
It was a lot of Rochambeau,
yeah,
and rolling the dice and picking numbers out of a hat, and it was very random. No, it was a process. It was definitely a process on both ends. A lot of craft breweries that I talked to really didn't have a whole lot of interest in it because it's just not a model that they
want to go after,
would ever use. But a lot did, because a lot of breweries do use a duplicate license to open up a tasting room, maybe across the street, or if they're a rural brewery, they open up a tasting room in town. So it does have a purpose and kind of a legitimate use, but the number 6, a Type 23 beer manufacturer's license is also allowed up to 6 retail licenses, and so it probably stemmed from that. It seemed like a reasonable number.
Were you guys lobbying for more?
Some in the association were lobbying for more, but I felt comfortable with 6, and ultimately that's where we landed.
Now, this seems to be like we talked a little bit about this the other night. I mean, this is truly a great example of craft brewers and wholesalers being able to work together to resolve an issue legislatively at a time where it seems like craft brewers and wholesalers are at odds with one another over many legislative issues, not the least of which being franchise laws. What does this say about just sort of their ability to work together, and does it have an impact on how things move forward for other bills down the road?
I think it's the only way to fly. I mean, if you can, it's not easy, but as difficult as it is, if you can sit in a room together and hash things out, it is I think, a much, much more productive way to get things done. I think it's a big part of the problem in Washington, D.C., and why we're at a standstill politically in moving forward on a lot of key issues in this country. That's a whole other topic. But usually both parties come away thinking, we didn't get what we wanted. We had to give something up. And so in my mind, I like to build partnerships and consensus, and I like to get things done that way rather than through legislative battles, because in legislative battles, both parties kind of come out bloodied and,
Having spent a lot of money.
having spent a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of money from my members, we could be doing a lot more very productive things. So that is one course of action and one way to do it. And again, the hard part is because when you sit down in a room together and you come to a compromise, it's both parties kind of feel like they didn't get what they wanted. But at the same time, I think it's beneficial to the industry and to both parties overall. So it was we're not done yet, but we're very, very close. It was a very gratifying experience, and I think that it portends very well here in California, but I really hope that nationally our industry can work more closely with all the stakeholders in our industry. I'm a very big advocate for that, not just wholesalers, but the big brewers and the importers as well.
Who were the biggest stakeholders here in this particular scenario? Are you able to talk about some of the brewers that had a hand in making this, actually come to fruition and making this work?
Well, it was the larger brewers. So it was Anheuser-Busch and it was Miller Coors, and it was the beer wholesalers, and it was ourselves who were in the room together working through this issue.
Interesting. So, you said earlier that you didn't think it was going to be something that would impact craft too much, but I sort of see it a little bit differently. I definitely see this as a serious opportunity, having the unlimited, right? 6 I think is just I think is plenty as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a serious opportunity for craft brewers if they wanted to go out and build these tasting rooms and build these retail outlets essentially, and completely erode the 3-tier system in my mind. That's kind of the way I look at it. I'll be a little bit more blunt about saying that probably, but it is a complete erosion of the 3-tier system to be able to have an unlimited amount of places where you're only selling your product.
Right.
So I think this does have some serious ramifications for craft, and I think craft brewers should be happy with 6. 6 seems like a pretty fair compromise. Mm-hmm. Are there any other sort of issues out there that might be coming down the pike that you can look back at this particular one and say, all right, look, we learned from 2010, AB 2010. Now we're going to apply this same sort of methodology and this thinking to others down the road?
None that I can think of. I think we're in a pretty comfortable position here in California, and we have some very, very important privileges. Obviously, tasting rooms and self-distribution, things of that nature, but I don't really see those being threatened, but you never know what comes out of the woodwork. It's a fascinating business, politics, especially in the alcohol beverage industry. So it's amazing because every year there's 5 to 10 or more bills directly and specifically related to the alcohol beverage industry. Who would think that there would be that many? So every year there's something new, and every year there's something new that I never would have dreamed of. So nothing that I can think of, but I can assure you next year is another year with new issues. Right.
Well, hopefully both parties sort of come to the table again and have a beer and find some common ground, right?
Right.
Nice. So one of the other issues that we were talking about that I sort of had on my short list was the state budget and single bottle sales. They're sort of connected. Talk to me about that. These are sort of future policy issues. They don't have a bill right now, but talk to me about the state budget and what you guys were able to accomplish there and how that impacts single bottle sales or could impact single bottle sales.
Well, there was money put into the budget for this fiscal year that adds 10 new positions at the ABC here in California. And those positions will be agents, field agents in trade enforcement and field enforcement. And we very, very strongly supported that. And we testified in favor of that. And that was successfully put into the budget and signed by the governor. So it remains in the budget, and the ABC now has the money to hire those new positions. And that's good for our industry for two reasons. One is we really need to be good stewards of our licenses because our licenses are privileges, not rights. They can be taken away at any time. And all the privileges associated with those licenses are subject to change. So we need to be good stewards of our licenses. And so having some semblance of enforcement out there is a good thing. Secondly, it adds field agents, and they're the ones that go out and enforce underage drinking. They enforce the retail accounts that are problem accounts that do exist. And counties and cities have sometimes proposed a solution that doesn't work very well, trying to solve the problem of serving to over-intoxicated people, underage people, or people that just buy a very strong alcoholic beverage, put it in a brown paper bag, and go outside and drink it on the street. And those problems do exist, and those problem retail accounts do exist. And so many counties and cities have either passed or proposed an ordinance to ban the sale of single bottles, which probably doesn't solve the problem, but certainly kind of captures craft beer in the net, and we certainly aren't part of the problem. So if people aren't buying a $14 bottle of a Belgium-style ale and putting it in a brown paper bag. We know what they're buying, but we get caught in the net.
Too many people drinking like Bourbon County Stout out of a brown paper bag. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So Sacramento has an ordinance in a certain district that bans single bottle sales, and so we get wrapped up into that. So part of the problem is that the ABC is understaffed and not able to go out and enforce those retail accounts that are the problem accounts. And the cities and counties are feeling the burden on their local law enforcement, city police and county sheriffs. So we hope and we feel that it's kind of in a very roundabout way, but we feel that increasing the staffing, enforcement staffing at ABC will actually lessen the initiative to impose these single bottle sales.
And is that a real concern for you guys in other areas of the state, other cities, that they are going to just take their own initiative to ban single bottle sales? I mean,
well, I've had a number of cities and counties come to us, and fortunately they have come to us and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. We don't want to harm the craft brewing industry in our area. What do you think about this? Is there a better solution? So we've been able to kind of set that aside. Sacramento County is a good example. The county was going to impose a single bottle ban on new retail accounts, and so the industry collectively got engaged, and we were able to get them to reconsider and put it on the shelf for now, but it will probably come back next year. So we hope that we'll be able to point to the ABC being better staffed and being better stewards of their licenses that they're responsible for enforcing, and hopefully diminish that threat of single bottle sales.
So many craft brewers rely on the 22-ounce bomber format for the early part of their business,
especially
before they can scale up.
Exactly.
So in your mind, would this be a craft beer killer?
Not a killer, but it could be kind of a party pooper. I mean, in those areas where it's in place, it would be very difficult, especially for the local startups, to get much traction.
Right. But there are areas of Sacramento and some other areas that you said that have banned single bottle sales, and craft brewers have found a pretty unique way of going about that, or retailers have found a unique way of getting around it and sort of circumventing the restrictions. That's by just selling 2 bottles.
2 packs.
2 packs.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that, obviously that will have a little bit of a trickle-down effect, I would imagine. Some people might not want to buy 2 beers when they only want to buy 1. Right. But is that, at least a temporary solution? And how do you move beyond that in those areas that are already, kind of off the map, off the off the board?
It's tough. I mean, again, there's a district of the city of Sacramento that has a single bottle ban, and also same in Oakland, and you will probably never be able to move the needle on those. It's so well entrenched that we've tried to change it, and we were unsuccessful. I don't think we will ever be successful at changing it. The neighborhood groups are strongly for it and oppose any change to it. So there have been some creative ways around it, and I think the craft brewers will just have to work with that. But I would hate to see it expand more extensively than what it is now.
Interesting. And that's definitely a real concern for you guys moving forward next year.
Yes. Yeah.
Any other policy issues or legislative issues that are sort of on your radar? Those are the few that I had picked out. Any others that you want to discuss that you think are very important?
No, I think we hit all the key ones. There is, there's an interesting one, which is the homebrewers bill, which is AB 2609.
Yep.
And just real quickly, the homebrewers and home winemakers passed a late session bill last year that allows them to serve home-brewed beer and homemade wine at special event licenses, so beer festivals. So that was very unique. We did not have an opportunity to get engaged in that bill, so it passed kind of very, very late session in the dark of night, so to speak. They came back with a second bill to expand those privileges this year, and we did have a chance to get engaged with that. Our biggest concern is that homebrewers are attending beer festivals, and in some cases, looking and feeling like a commercial brewery. You know, they're a home brewer, but they call themselves Tom's Brewing Company, and they have the signage and coasters, and they're right next to one of our members, and the average consumer doesn't know if they're a home brew or a commercial brew. So we had this bill amended that requires homebrewers to be in a designated area of a beer festival.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely seems like it could present some problems when you think about quality or anything else. You don't want consumers being confused.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
So that was an important amendment to a bill on our part.
And now, where is that right now? Any updates on that one? Is that?
Well, no, that's on pause right now too because the legislature's in summer session.
Likelihood of that getting approved?
It's probably will be approved.
Okay. Well, that's sort of it for the state level. I did want to kind of toss one out to you. I know we talked about this, sort of the very first email I sent you was talking about sort of franchise laws, and you successfully steered me away for the time being to say that that's been beaten down. But it is a top-of-mind issue, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask at least one or two questions, and especially when you consider the fact that you've been able to work now successfully with wholesalers to find some common ground. When you think about what you were able to achieve there in finding that common ground, what sort of impact do you think that has for an issue like franchise laws, which are so hotly contested and debated now at pretty much every event that I attend?
Really? Wow. Yeah, it's a pretty emotional issue. There was a lot that came out of the Craft Brewers Conference around that. You know, I don't know if what is going on here in California has that much of an impact, but I would hope that it's a model for wholesalers and craft brewers and the beer industry in general to sit down and have realistic and relevant conversation. The Brewers Association would tell you that hasn't happened, and I'm not close enough to the situation on a national level. Well, I kind of am, but I'm not going to say whatever. But my understanding is that there really hasn't been relevant dialogue, and it's been very frustrating to the craft brewing industry because they have sat down with beer wholesalers, and the beer wholesalers have said, "Oh yes, we understand your points. Well, let's talk more about it." And it's the same thing year after year after year after year. And so
nothing gets done.
10 years down the road, you get a little tired of hearing that. But again, I'm not on the inside there, so I don't really know the intimate details of that. So I would just encourage both parties to sit down and have relevant conversations and move the needle. You have to move the needle. You have to make progress. You can't just talk about it. You have to make progress, and make progress, you have to give something up.
Not that duplicate license was, the biggest issue ever, but you were able to move the needle. You were able to have that conversation. So how did you guys accomplish that? And what can we learn at the national level to take a step back and think about it from that context? What can other people learn from you guys being able to, kind of take that step forward?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to it. I just think that there has to be a sincere effort from both parties, and to go into the meeting knowing that you're going to have to give something up, and that has to be felt by both parties. I haven't been in those meetings at a national level, so I don't know what, I don't want to say that there's blame, but obviously there's a stalemate, and there hasn't been significant progress one way or the other. So I would just have to say that both parties are going to have to realize that it's an emotional issue, and it's a very important issue to craft brewers. And both parties have to really make a sincere effort. I don't know what the answer to that is, really.
I mean, they were able to accomplish some things in New York. The last event that I was at, Jim Cook pretty much proudly, exclaimed that, there's going to be carve-outs pretty much everywhere at some point, so might as well get on board now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all that shakes out.
It is.
But I think there is something to be learned from what you guys are doing here in California to say, look, we sit at the table together, we have a beer, we realize that we're giving something up, and we're okay with that, and we're hoping that it's for the better down the road for both sides.
Right.
So yeah, my only other question is, how are you doing such a good job here in California, Tom? What's the secret?
It's the weather.
Yeah, you figured something out here.
It's the happy cows and happy brewers.
I think any state in the country would be lucky to have someone like you kind of helping. Yeah, you really seem to understand it from both sides, and there's not a lot of.
Well, that's because I owned a distributorship for 10 years.
Well, maybe we need more people like you in some of these other states.
Yeah, well, California is a big state, and we're a leading state in a lot of ways. So we're very blessed. We're very lucky to have an incredible craft brewing industry here. We have 460 plus craft breweries in the state of California. So, I work a lot with all the other state guilds and the guild leaders and my counterparts. We get together often, and it's a very tough road when you only have 40 breweries, 40 members.
Right.
So, I just have a lot more horsepower because we have a big state with a lot of breweries. It's a very important component to our economy. This is the birthplace of the craft brewing industry. It's an incredible state in terms of the craft brewing industry. In the membership is incredible. All the new startups, very engaged, and the old pioneer, sophisticated breweries like Sierra Nevada and Anchor, who are so supportive of the industry as a whole, is amazing to me. And I have an incredible board. And I tell my board members, when you come to a board meeting, you take off your brewery hat and you put on your craft brewing industry hat. And you're here not to represent your business and your brewery, you're here to represent the craft brewing industry as a whole. And we have a very diverse board, so we intentionally have board members who come from small breweries, and we have board members that come from the larger breweries. So it's a very cohesive board that really is able to look at the long term and the long picture and make decisions that are based on the best interest of our industry today and 5 years and 10 years down the road. So it's a wide combination of things, but yeah, we have an incredible brewing industry here in California, thanks to everyone here.
All right. So check your egos at the door is the lesson I gathered from
That's
that.
right. Yeah, that's my mantra. Yeah.
All right.
Did I tell you that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right.
We're going to take a short break to fill up beers and get a bite, and we'll meet back here in about 10 minutes to have the next half of our discussion.